So today I'm going to give you a total of 5 tips. The first tip is about light. So I know you're probably thinking, okay, I know the basics of lighting. Every single plant that I bring into my house is either direct light, indirect light, or low light. I know how much time it needs to be in the light. But the one thing you might not know is spectrums. And this is something a lot of us don't really ever think about because it's kind of just something we don't think about. So when our plants are outside in the natural environment, they are getting the full spectrum of the sunshine. So they're getting all the different color lights within the sun. And so when we bring those plants into our home, it's put into an artificial environment. So they're not getting the full spectrum of lighting all day at the full intensity. So plants, when they're growing, need 2 specific types of light waves to really flourish. One is red light, which helps the growth of flowers. The other is blue light, which helps all the beautiful new foliage to develop. So without those 2 specific light spectrums, our plants aren't going to flourish as much as they possibly could. Now, our artificial light in the houses is not reds and blues typically. It is more green and yellow on the spectrum. So it's not exactly what the plant really, really wants. And that sometimes can be why our plants inside are not getting the beautiful flowers they would outside, and they're not getting as much lush growth inside. Tip number 2 is going to be water. So there are 3 main types of water sources we can give our plants. We can give them tap water right out of the faucet. We can give them filtered or distilled water, or we can give them natural rainwater. So there's differences between them. The tap water oftentimes has fluoride, chlorine, heavy metals, and high sodium, which can drastically affect the health of a plant, especially if they're very sensitive plants like tropical plants. Now, the next type of water is filtered or distilled water. Now, this water is great because it's completely stripped of all those minerals and things that could impact the plant. The third type is rainwater. So for this, obviously, you have to harvest the rain that comes down in your area. Now, this can be a challenge if you live in a desert area where you don't get as much rain. So it really depends on where you live. It's still doable, but you do have to harvest the rain water when it falls and collect it and have it ready for your plant. So what's the best? Rainwater. Mainly because it's already comes out without all of the added stuff like fluoride or chlorine and stuff of that nature. Also, it is already naturally soft, which is what your plants will really like. Look at the options of water and figure out what works best for you and your plants in your specific area that you live. Thanks for helping me grow my channel by liking and subscribing. I really appreciate it. Tip number 3 is a big one. This is one that a lot of people never, ever think about. So a lot of times we'll repot our plants, especially our indoor plants or outdoor pots we have on our patios or our porches or our decks. Repotting our plant every couple of years is something we'll think about. But do you think about aeration? So outside in our gardens, the soil is constantly getting movement from worms or ants or beetles or other little insects. And that is so key because the roots of the plant need to get air, and they also just need to get a flow so that they can be as healthy as they can and absorb as much water and nutrients as they can. And when we bring the plants into our homes and put them into a really confining pot, they don't have all the access to those bugs that were working through the soil doing their magic. And so when we bring that into the house, using an aerator is key. This is the one we sell at Stand With Nature. It's just a really wonderful tool that you just take your plant. I'll show you right here. You take your plant and you just simply poke into the soil so that you can, you work your way around the roots so that you can loosen up the soil and it can get better air circulation. And then it can also get the water coming into the soil better. So if you've ever noticed when you're watering a plant, if you water the plant and the water just sits on the top and just hangs out there and has a party and doesn't drain down, A lot of times that's because your soil isn't aerated. And so all the water is just hanging out at the top and not reaching down to the roots. And you want to make sure that you're aerating your soil regularly so that it gets down to the roots and it can absorb into the plant, get the nutrients and water and oxygen that it needs. Okay, number 4 is to fertilize and feed your plant. So plants are actually a lot like humans. We need basic things to stay happy and healthy. And water is great, but if we don't get food and nutrients, we're not going to be our happiest. And it's the same with our plants in our home. We need to make sure we're fertilizing them regularly. And there are 2 main types of fertilizer. There's liquid fertilizer or there's slow release fertilizer. I prefer using the liquid fertilizers, and I prefer to use organic fertilizers that are kelp based. We actually have a fertilizer that we sell at Stand With Nature, and it is a really condensed, rich kelp fertilizer. And it is so much safer for the home. I don't know about you, but being a mom, I'm always constantly worried about what I'm bringing into the home. I have the 2 young children. I myself am pregnant. I also have 2 little dogs and my husband. I don't want to be bringing chemicals into the house. For a lot of these fertilizers have very, very chemical, strong, synthetic things in it that are just not good to have in the house. A lot of them are cancer causing and have just really nasty things in them. And so I like to use organic, natural fertilizers. And I really like the liquid stuff because you can not only dilute it and water your plant, but it's really great for using for your foliage. So a lot of times the fertilizer will not just go into the soil and get absorbed by the plant and the roots and impact it that way in a positive way, but also by spraying it onto your foliage, it absorbs into the leaves. So I do both. I think it's very beneficial for the plant and it really just gives it that extra kick. And organic fertilizers are fantastic. It's something that you can feel safe and comfortable bringing into your home. And again, you can easily work it into the schedule of plant care. You could even do it at that every other time when you're doing the aeration. So with aeration, I do it every 2 weeks. Okay, tip number 5 is to remember that your plants are wild. I know this sounds pretty obvious, but I don't think it's something people really speak about very often. You're taking a plant that's out in a natural environment and bringing it into your home, which is completely artificial environment. And so we have to keep that in mind. And in order to help our plants flourish to their best potential, we need to mimic Mother Nature ourselves. So we need to be sure every 12 to 18 months we're repotting the plant with completely new soil. We need to make sure that if we have the plant by an area where it's starting to grow in one direction because that's where the light source is, that we're turning it so it's even. We need to make sure we're aerating it. We have to be okay with plants dying and falling off. That's natural. That's part of the life cycle. And every living thing, including us, has, loss of, hair or leaves or whatever. That's part of life. That's okay. Sometimes it is about like a disease or overwatering or too much light. But sometimes plants naturally have leaves die, and that's okay. It's part of the wild. It's natural. So just keep that in mind. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Kim from Stand With Nature, your new plant bestie. And I hope you learned a couple new things that will level up your plants and just make you connect with them on a much deeper level and make them happy and healthy. Until next time, take care and love the plants you have.